Welcome back to another Five Nights at Freddy's theory, and today I want to talk about what I believe is in the box. Now, before we begin, I have seen the new Scott and Daco interview. I had half of this video made before the interview, and I didn't think anything was gonna get released, but then Scott just dropped this huge bombshell on us in the interview. But what he said doesn't really change what I think about this theory. I think this theory is still solid, and we'll cover what Scott said at the end of this video. So to start off this theory, we need to talk about what the box is, in case somebody doesn't know. Because there's a lot of boxes in this franchise. There's gift boxes, there's the box that the puppet's in, there's the box that now the mimic puppet thing is in that we've seen in the new trailer. What box exactly am I talking about? Well, when somebody in the FNAF community is talking about the box, they're normally talking about this box. The box that was teased at the end of FNAF 4, saying that there are things that should be left forgotten for now. This box was released at the end of probably the most confusing game in this franchise, FNAF 4, and Scott continued to tell us that whatever was in this box was the pieces put together. And then maybe after a month after FNAF 4 was released, Scott just decided, you know what? That box is getting locked up forever. But that doesn't mean that Scott hasn't thought of giving us the contents of the box before. I mean, in FNAF world, we have a picture of the box being opened in the files, and in Fury's Rage, we can find Dreamgeist with the box in his head. So Scott has thought of giving us the contents of the box on multiple occasions, but stopped himself. Like I said earlier, Scott said that the contents of the box are the pieces put together. But that's only half of what he said. The other half is, will the community accept it that way? And that's why I think that he hasn't told us what the contents of the box are yet. He's not sure if we're ready for what was in the box. Even today, we're still not ready for the contents. But that doesn't mean that we can't try to guess still. Many theorists before me have tried to guess what's in this box, from it being a toy box that contains all the FNAF 4 toys, to it being something that would represent that the crying child is related to Foxy Bro and William Afton, to it being the medical equipment that the crying child needed on his last few days on Earth, to it even containing the crying child's remains itself. And like many before me, I'm also going to attempt to guess what's in this box. Now, before you start throwing tomatoes at me down in the comment section, I want to make a quick deal with you. I want you to go down in the comment section right now, and I want you to tell me what you think is in the box. It can be as short or as long as you want. You could just say it's Bonnie's left shoe, or you could give me a 17-page essay if you really want to. Then, when you're done, I want you to come back and watch the rest of the video. And when you're done with the video, I want you to go back to your comment, and I want you to see if your opinion changes on what's in the box, because I'm very confident in what I think is in the box. So, what do I think is in this box? I'll tell you. Come a little bit closer. Little bit closer. Little bit more. I think the box contains every retcon in the franchise. Now, the best way that I think that I can convey that this box contains every retcon in the franchise is to start with one retcon. The first retcon. Now, for those of you who are unaware or just kind of forgot, because hey, this Reddit post occurred 7 years ago at this point, Scott gave us confirmation that there was exactly one retcon that occurred before the release of Pizzeria Simulator. Now, I've heard a lot of theorists talk about this retcon, and most of them come to the same two conclusions: Dream Theory and Charlie. Let's first go over the Charlie retcon. In FNAF 2, we play this minigame that depicts the kid who eventually goes on to possess the puppet, dying outside the building. Now, this minigame has the nickname Save Him because of what's spelled out while we're playing the minigame. S-A-V-E-H-I-M. Now, a lot of people believe this to be the retcon because we see the exact same events play out in FNAF 6, but this time it's from a different perspective. This time we play as the puppet, trying to get a hold of the kid who managed to get outside the building when they're not supposed to. And when this kid dies outside, the puppet collapses beside them. We then find out that this kid who goes on to possess the puppet was actually Henry's daughter in his famous speech. Now, normally changing a character's gender in FNAF doesn't matter a whole lot. I mean, Mangle spits in the face of gender and checks every box that's going to be on that list. So changing the gender of Henry's kid really shouldn't matter a lot. The sudden gender change in FNAF 6 originally made a lot of people think that the kid in these minigames wasn't originally supposed to be the same kid. And by that I mean in FNAF 2, it was originally supposed to be the crying child, and then later got retconned in FNAF 6 to be Henry's kid, Charlie. But not only do I think that this can't be the retcon that Scott was talking about 7 years ago, I don't even know if we can say that this is a retcon. Now, as I said before, this Reddit post gets released before FNAF 6 does, and because of this statement that Scott says, to be clear, the one retcon mentioned was integrated pretty seamlessly, and most people didn't notice. If it had caused problems or confusion, then I would have addressed it here. That makes it sound like that the retcon has already happened, so it can't happen in FNAF 6, and we don't learn about the gender change until FNAF 6. Now, some of you might be saying, well, we learn about Charlotte from the Silver Eyes trilogy, meaning that we do learn about the gender change before FNAF 6. And to that, you're correct. We do learn about the gender change through the books, but if we're going to use the books as evidence, we have to bring in a new character, Sammy. You see, in the Silver Eyes trilogy, we actually learned that Charlotte had a brother named Sammy, but Sammy died at a really young age. At least that's what the first two books want you to think, because in the fourth closet, we learn that Charlotte is a robot that's been programmed to think that she's the real Charlotte because Charlotte died at a really young age. And in order to cover up the fact that Charlotte was the one who died at a young age, the robot is programmed to think that Sammy was the one who died at a young age. Now, the fourth closet didn't release until a year after Pizzeria Simulator, so it could be argued that this was just another retcon on top of the original retcon, but the trilogy started back in 2015, meaning that this twist ending that happened a year after Pizzeria Simulator started 2 years before the release of Pizzeria Simulator. You see, this is why I think that Charlie being a girl in FNAF 6 isn't a retcon from what we see in FNAF 2. If Charlie had a brother in the games like she does in the books, and she thought that he was the one who died that night, then this could just be her memories that we're playing through, meaning that she only finds out later that she's the dead one instead of her brother. So now that I talked about why I think Charlie going from a boy to a girl wasn't the retcon, let's talk about Dream Theory. Now at this point, I'm sure that we all know what Dream Theory is. It's been memed on 1,000 times at this point, but in case somebody who's watching doesn't know, Dream Theory basically says that when FNAF 4 first came out, it stated that the first 4 games in the series were all dreams from the crying child's perspective. Now originally, Game Theory made this theory very popular and they did an amazing job on that video, but as they state in that video, it's just not a satisfying ending to the franchise. FNAF 4 was originally stated to be the last game in the franchise, and I think Scott knew that this wasn't going to be a satisfying ending. Scott was trying to use these games in order to tell us a story, and while the plot twist of it was all a dream does exist in a lot of stories today, it tends to leave a bitter taste in people's mouths after getting to that point. That's why I think that this part of the Reddit post in particular is trying to hint to us that this was never the intention of the story in the first place. Quote, "The truth is that I've done one actual retcon in the series, although I'm not going to say where it was. There have been other times, however, when my original intentions didn't come across clearly. In those instances, I make a point to clarify in the next game. That's not really a retcon, it's simply an attempt to guide the story toward where it was originally intended to go." He then went on to say how he dropped a teaser in order to squash the idea of a theory that was popping up that he didn't like at the time, and then goes on to say, quote, "I used sister location to clear up a misconception from FNAF 4, end quote. And I think that this misconception that he's talking about is Dream Theory. Now, like I said before, Dream Theory at the time was great. It quite literally wrapped up everything that we had about the franchise at the time. But that's also its biggest weakness. It wrapped up everything. Now, when Dream Theory was first released by the game theorists, it needed to wrap up every loose end in the franchise. This was being advertised as the final chapter in the FNAF franchise. But was it really supposed to be the end of FNAF? Let's take another quick look at that teaser from FNAF 4. Scott could have worded this teaser to say anything he wanted. He could have said the final night, the final scare, the final fright, the end, but Scott specifically called it the final chapter. And now that we have hundreds of books to look through in this series, just because it's the final chapter of this book doesn't mean it's the end of the story. Going back to the game theorist video, MatPat even says in that video that while yes, Dream Theory does technically cover all the loose ends from FNAF 4 and before, it does it in a very strange way. Like, how does a small child accurately guess the accurate payment rates of a job 5 to 10 years before it's supposed to happen with accurate inflation rates? And if FNAF 4 was supposed to be the end of the series, why does it bring up so many new questions that have no answers to them in this game? Like the girls' room in the house, or the toy animatronics having actual toys made of them 4 years before the animatronics are supposed to be made, or the text color at the end of the game being a different color from every other text that we've seen up to this point in this series, or my personal favorite, and the one that we're talking about today, the box. And if that's not enough for you, let's take a quick look at game releases. FNAF 4 was released in July of 2015, and FNAF World, the next game in the series, was released in January of 2016. This is a 6-month difference, which is a little bit longer than all the previous games that Scott has worked on. But Scott wasn't just working on FNAF World after FNAF 4. He was also working on the Silver Eyes. This means that FNAF 4 was never meant to be the end of the franchise. It only meant to be the end of this part of the story, meaning it didn't need to wrap up every loose end that we had in the franchise. And Dream Theory was never canon. So if Dream Theory was never meant to be canon and Charlie was always meant to be a girl, what in the world was this retcon that Scott was talking about? Well, according to Scott, this needs to be an event that was told to us directly and then retold to us later on before this Reddit post, because if it was just something that the community was predicting and then he releases something that goes against our prediction, as long as all the pieces fit together, it's not a retcon. We also need to make sure that this retcon isn't just a new detail being told to us about something we already know. It needs to be a detail that was changed. Let's take Didophobia for example. Didophobia tells us that FNAF 4 was some sort of experiment using nightmare gas, a detail that was told to us back in Sister Location with this teaser image. Finally, according to Scott, this detail needed to seamlessly integrate into the lore without many people realizing it. I think the first retcon in the series is the ending to FNAF 3, and here's why. FNAF 3 was said multiple times to be the last game in the series by Scott. He wanted FNAF 3 to be the end, and then the community was upset with it. Mostly because of Springtrap's jump scare. It kind of sucks, I'm not gonna lie, but it had an amazing story. It wrapped up everything that we needed. We had a good ending and we had a bad ending. The bad ending shows the kids not moving on, and the good ending shows them moving on after getting revenge on their killer. Scott then stated in the first doco interview that he didn't want to reveal the true ending to FNAF 3 because it's complicated. Now, maybe I've just been looking at FNAF for too long, but how is giving us a good ending where the souls move on and a bad ending where they don't move on complicated, unless neither are the answer? Let's jump to FNAF World for a second. In FNAF World, one of the endings is the clock ending, and in this ending, you have to collect clocks around the map. Big shocker. But after you collect the clock, you have a quick minigame, and this minigame is very similar to the Happiest Day minigames in FNAF 3. Now, why is any of this relevant? This shows that we're setting up the Happiest Day minigames for FNAF 3, and implies that those games do get played during the events of FNAF 3, but I don't think this leads to the souls moving on. So effectively, we did do the Happiest Day, we just didn't get the correct outcome. We did everything correct. We played all the mini games. We attempted to free all these innocent kids, but they still didn't move on because by the time of Sister Location and every game afterwards, there are still haunted animatronics. So, we've been going for about 15 minutes in this video and I've hardly touched the box. How does anything that I've been talking about relate to the box? Well, how many locks are on the box? 2. So obviously you need 2 keys. How many endings to FNAF 3 are there? 2. So you need 2 endings, the 2 keys to unlock the box, putting the pieces together. The box represents the retcon of the FNAF 3 ending. We did everything correctly for Happiest Day. The kids didn't get their happiest day. That's the retcon, putting both endings together. Moving forward from just the one retcon, Scott has said that MatPat was correct. The contents of the box have changed multiple times over the years. Why would the contents of the box need to change after FNAF 4? It's because he keeps putting more things into the box. More retcons that have shown up in the franchise over the years. And now we reach the point of the Scott and Daco interview, where I thought I was gonna have to rewrite the entire video or scrap it entirely, but we got the good ending. Now, a lot of people seem to think that Scott said that he just doesn't know what's in this box anymore, which, to be honest, would be really freaking funny. But that doesn't seem to be what he said, at least in my opinion. To me, it sounded like he has an idea of where he wants the story to go, and he tries to build the story towards that idea. Most of the time it works out. Sometimes he veers a little too far, and a lot of the time, even if he veers too far, he can come back to the idea later. But in the sense of the box, he has built the story towards the box, and he completely missed it. He cannot come back to it anymore because it either doesn't make sense at this point in the story, or he just can't fit it into the story that he's trying to tell anymore. Now, if we take what Scott said about the contents of the box and compare it to what I think is in the box, he's right. It just doesn't make sense. You'd have to go back to FNAF 3 and recreate Happiest Day in order to show that, yes, we do the Happiest Day ending, but we don't get the outcome that we thought. And there's no way for that to happen in the story right now. And yes, he could just flat out say, yeah, this is what I meant whenever I put it in the box, but then he'd have to reveal everything else that's in the box for us to be satisfied, revealing every retcon. And with that, I'm gonna leave this video here. Don't forget to go back down below and add to your comment to let me know if anything in this video changed your mind about the contents of the box. I really wanna know. And while you're down there, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I really wanna hit 10K by the end of September. I also have a lot more videos planned about things that came out during the 10-year anniversary that I really wanna talk about, but if you can't wait until then, there should be 2 videos popping up on screen right now that you can watch. Thanks again for watching to the very end, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye!